I'm Jim Collison and live from the Gallup campus here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, a special CliftonStrengths Summit 2016 edition, recorded on November 23rd, 2016. This special edition of Call to Coach is designed to highlight some of the more popular sessions that were given during the CliftonStrengths Summit in 2016. We'll be interviewing session leaders on the best material in their sessions. Brandon Miller is CEO of 34 Strong and our guest today. 34 Strong is a company that focuses on strengths-based organizational development. Since 2003, Brandon and the 34 Strong team have coached over 1,000 people through their StrengthsFinder results and facilitated training for hundreds of teams in government, corporate, and nonprofit organizations. Brandon presented at the CliftonStrengths Summit. The title of his presentation was From Startup to Success. Brandon, great to have you on Call to Coach. Welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Glad to be here.
Let's start with your top five, and then give me a little insight into 34 Strong beyond the bio that I read there for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a maximizer, achiever, activator, strategic, arranger. So I'm one of those guys that found out that they had a word for what I called the squirrel syndrome.
Yes.
So run by and, that's what this is, that maximizer, achiever, run after everything but sometimes not hit anything. So have learned how to develop those talents and put them forward in a great effort to build 34 Strong, which in 2013, we're almost up on 4 years when I went through certification in January of 13, the first course offered there at the Omaha campus, and had the idea to launch a specific focused business around strengths. So 34 Strong, 34 Themes was born, and we've learned a ton in going on 4 years of just who to market to, how to build this business, where we're putting our effort and energy, the partnership that Darren Versami and myself have in growing this. He presented with me at the summit. And so we've just learned a lot. We put in more airline miles than we both ever thought we would in the last 3 years of getting to go out and talk to different teams and organizations. But we're having a great time and looking forward to sharing today.
Yeah, you guys are a good model for the way to do it from a partnership standpoint. I think we've interviewed you before when we think about meetups. We've talked to you guys about the way you're doing things. We had you at the summit. You partnered with Jamie Libro and your partner Darren there. Before we dive into this, any surprises at the summit when you were giving the presentation on things that you didn't plan to cover that maybe came up in some questions, or was there anything like that happened? If you can remember that, it's been a while.
It has been, but we enjoyed a packed room, and people were very curious about just one, how did you guys form the partnership? So we had some questions around just how Darren and I work together, but mostly it was, how are you getting business? I mean, that is a core question that we were asked there, and that we're asked on a fairly regular basis as we go. People want to understand from services and products that we offer to just understanding, how are you growing? How are you handling growth? What do you do when you encounter a project larger than yourself? So some of those questions were interesting and helpful to listen to.
Yeah, and it's always good to present with others. Today to be kind of going through your material. If individuals, so you mentioned, and you get a lot of questions, I'm sure, as people are like, as we bring solo coaches into this, some coaches considering this for the very first time, and they kind of see what you were doing. And so as you guys started forming this or starting putting this together, what were some of the things that you learned, or some of the whys behind what you were doing? And as you're giving advice to others about getting started, what are some of those pieces they need to consider?
Yeah, so I think for us, we wanted to understand who are we in the market without overthinking what we would offer. So we, after going through the Gallup certification and building on what we had done previous to that, because as you read in the bio, we started in 2003. So we were putting strengths work together early on, at least for my own past, quite a bit internal and then external as a consultant. But what was 34 Strong going to offer? So figuring that out, and Lean Startup was a book that we leaned heavy on. In fact, Paul Allen had recommended, and Darren, my partner, knew that book from some of his studies. And so we were able to take that idea of, let's figure out our go-to-market strategy. Let's figure out what it is that we're going to offer and begin to put it out there and see which sectors of the market respond to us. Along the way, though, we really wanted to embed a good company culture. So Simon Sinek wrote a book called Leaders Eat Last that we highly recommend to people starting a business, because it just helps you to have a right perspective of what you might be looking for as it dovetails with the strengths, the strengths business, the industry of going out and helping to reform and change culture. If we're going to be culture reformers, which is what we like to call ourselves, we're essentially helping people think completely different about development, completely different about how they do business. And so having some cultural fabric underneath your business is important. So that book, I do need to plug my friend Maureen Monty, because we have been leveraging her book, Destination Unstoppable, even in our company as we establish our culture recently, and just thinking not letting anyone on the team fail, which is a big takeaway we took from the book, and really coming together, appreciating strengths. So that was important. But then just logistically, Jim, managing money is an important part of running any successful business. Profit First was a book that we grabbed a hold of. It's helped us to think about how we sector our resources and how we think about growth and where we're going to expand. So we recommend some of those books for people that are thinking about the business side, whether they're just a sole practitioner or they're thinking of building a business around contractors out there or employees. There's some helpful tips in some of those books that they can build from.
No, it's some good advice, and I too have been deep in Maureen's book, and I think that not letting anybody on the team fail is super important, especially when you're forming a team, even in a business relationship. How did you and Darren just the story of you guys coming together, because that partnership is hard to do, I think, for a lot of people. Any tips that you would give as you're putting a team together, whether it's 2 or 5 or 10 in part?
Yeah, I would. We have this saying in our company, and it has to do with eat your own cooking, right? So if you're going to go in and help other cultures or individuals think about building from a strengths perspective, so it's their family or their faith group or their enterprise company or small business, start your company from that base. So Darren, when we and I met in early 2013, as we were starting to form this company, we started with, well, let's compare each other's talents. Where do we fit, and where do we have likeness, and where do we complement, and where are we potentially going to have conflicting views, and build from that perspective. We found that we had very complementary talents, but we were also aligned in mission. We both wanted to make a difference. We wanted our work to actually have impact in the people that we were working with. So Darren, in commercial construction, he was a college professor. Myself, having been a consultant for a number of years, decided that we found some alignment, and then we took some time to do what we encourage anyone going into a partnership to do. I mean, this is what we expect people to do when they're going to get married, right? Spend some time getting to know each other, date a little while, think about what the final, end product might be, but do some work together. And so Darren and I did that, working on some projects, figuring out, then what would the structure of the business be like. Darren happens to be an MBA, so he's got a real mind for the business side of things. And so we really went down a path of just deciding, are we aligned? And I even, this is something that you don't have to do, but it helps. We got our families together. We got to know each other from a core value standpoint, and who we are, and what our goals are, what our future intent is for where we're going. We're both, Darren's in his later 30s, I'm in my early 40s. And so just where do we see this headed? And it was helpful to find alignment philosophically, both of our mission, vision, values in business, but even just our own, we found some great alignment in just where we personally could see this going. And so we didn't enter into an eternal partnership. So we start with the perspective that we do have an end in mind to the business. Maybe one day it sells, maybe one day it grows and we pass it on to our kids. But we understand that we are in business, that we do have a personal relationship. We valued both of those. And as a result, it's been healthy. And I got to offer this. There has to be the ability for you and your partner to disagree in a healthy way. I mean, you got to allow for it. It's going to happen. Swords are going to cross. And if both partners come in, this is where Leaders Eat Last really helped us, that we're there to serve each other. We're there to build around interdependence, serve each other, give each other the benefit of the doubt, respect and appreciate that we are well-meaning people, not seeing eye to eye. We both know we're headed towards somewhere that's positive. It's good. And it's helped us weather 4 years of partnership. And we've, we're both what you would call alpha males. So we're very strong in our perspectives and opinions. But thankfully it's gone really well. And so we do get asked that a fair amount. How did you set up the partnership? So I would say on the legal side, bring in an attorney. It is worth the investment, versus legal zooming it or forming a corporation or LLC. It is helpful to have everything thought about in advance of just what happens if somebody gets hurt, what happens if those are great things to think about before you need to think about them. So have those types of conversations can be really helpful.
Yeah, get those conversations out before they actually happen, so they've already been rehearsed.
That's right.
From that standpoint. Besides an attorney, did you guys employ any business coaching, or did you get a coach or employ a board of directors, anything like that to kind of help build some accountability and maybe cushion that a little bit?
We had an advisory board. So, and I can't really say it was official, but we gathered, both of us have. In fact, we met in the context of we were in mastermind groups. So we had a accountability around a circle of CEOs, and it was his colleague who was in my mastermind group and also in his that actually introduced us. So we had this circle of trust that we had established that we could go and listen to people. To this day, annually, we sit down with some trusted advisors that help us to review the business, where we've been. But I would add that we also sought out some strengths professionals who were ahead of us and went and actually traveled to their location, spent some time with them, asked them questions about what they've done. They were gracious enough to give us some perspective. We've invited and have had people reach out to us in the same kind of way of, how did you set it up? What did you do? What did you run into? What do you got to watch out for? So we did do that. We haven't employed a consultant per se, because we both have a business background, but we highly recommend, when people are thinking about building a business coaches can be super helpful, beneficial. So we do recommend them.
Yeah, it does. When you don't have the expertise, and you guys both went to school for that, sometimes you just pay for that expertise up front and make that part of the business cost going forward. Brandon, some of the things we see when people are forming anything, I see this in podcasting all the time, and we see this in coaching businesses, is they have trouble getting out the gate. Yeah. And so, it's can you talk a little bit about some of those struggles and then some advice you have around that?
Yeah, we have a saying, Darren offered this at the beginning. In fact, we had a third gentleman that we worked with in marketing, and he said, version 1 is better than version none. So when you encounter a need, you encounter a want in the market, do you do X, Y, Z? And often our answer was, yes, we do. And that necessity helped us to invent what it was that we were offering. We can't say that every time that happened, we ended up with a sustainable service offering. However, it did help us to establish some really great service offerings that we do to this day. We didn't start out 34 Strong thinking about doing train the trainer, going in and helping organizations think about how they would sustain StrengthsFinder. Gallup sells the coaching kits publicly, so people are trying to grab kits if they're not ready to attend a course there. So we put some things together. It really helped. I would add that just our meetup, for example, getting the idea of doing that was completely foreign to both of us. We had never hosted a meetup type thing. Paul threw out the idea, and we threw together, here's our version 1, and we just tweaked and made adjustments as we went along the way. But getting stuck, paralysis by analysis, right, or overthinking what you're offering, we've heard this from many. Well, if I get hired, what do I do with? And we would counter with, well, get hired, get yourself hired, do some marketing, figure out what works. Start to see what your market teaches you, and then begin to form your services. Because in this community, as you know, Jim, seeing just all the comments on the Facebook feed and in other chat rooms, there's so much help out there. If you need workshop activities, you need to come up with some strategies. There's so many open and gracious people willing to share, to take your steps forward and learn that way.
Yeah, although that can be a double-edged sword as well, and I see this sometimes too. Now there's almost too much information, and people are asking, "What do I like? What information here? What how do I use that? How do I go with opportunity in a market? What kind of things do you deploy? Just how do you respond to just keeping the ball rolling, or anything that you guys have done to kind of say, hey, we're not going to think about this any longer than a week, or those kinds of things that you put in place?
Yeah. So once we've established that we have a market, which is a big part of how we've built 34 Strong, is around understanding who is our target. So who is going to buy what we're selling, and where do we seem to have receptivity for who we are, our talents, our strengths, our background, our region geographically. And then once we know we have something, and we've done the the back end, is it profitable? Can we make money doing this? And can we see enough openness in the market, blue sky or blue ocean, however you want to describe that, that we can exploit the needs that are presenting themselves, or the wants. Sometimes it's a great company that wants to be even better company that hires you. So coming up with those channels for marketing, very important. And I think sustaining that was very helpful. So for example, we found that there was a need in leadership. People wanted to, they may have bought strengths-based leadership sometime in the past, or wanted to develop emerging leaders within their organization. So we came up with a Leading with Strengths deliverable that really focused on leaders. And we found that the more that we offered it, that became a lead service. People wanted to buy that. And as we kept it going, we tweaked, we made adjustments, we perfected, and now it's become one of our main staples that people hire us for.
Yeah, have you found, or is there anything that you found you've sunsetted that you tried, you thought might work, and then hasn't worked? And is that okay to let things go that way?
It is. So when we started, we would do one-to-one coaching. So we would be hired by professionals, be hired by leaders, get into, hey, can you do 6 sessions for X dollars? And we learned that one-to-one coaching was not really fitting the organizational work that we seem to find ourselves in more often. And it was a tough separation, because I love to do the coaching, and Darren's good at the coaching, and we have other coaches that love that part of the work, but it became clear to us that that was not the place for us to spend our time. We do still do coaching, but it's now in the context of a larger engagement. So it's going to be part of a series of workshops and then coaching within it. So that was a tough let go. That was something, and I'll speak personally, but we realized in the overall scope of how 34 Strong was growing, that particular service wasn't what we should have, what we should continue to offer.
Yeah, when it's your own baby, right? Sometimes that's particularly hard to let go of. And I think in the business world, a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of CEOs struggle with that and have trouble seeing that. Did you find that listening to the advice of those around you, kind of like, hey guys, did you come to that conclusion on your own, or was that like a group that kind of said, Brandon, we should probably give up on or do less of that? How did that pan out for you?
So there's a book that we read, and I will excuse the author for, how aggressive he can be with some of his language, but it's called The Pumpkin Plan. And The Pumpkin Plan is a book all about how these pumpkin farmers can grow these 1,000-pound pumpkins that you go to fairs to see. And just the whole strategy behind centering in on a target market and really having this deep penetration and sustainable business. And so for us, we adopted some of the principles that this author put into place, and just realized that if we could grow a lot of small pumpkins, or we could really hone in and build a large one or a couple large ones. So that necessitated us having to continue to reevaluate. And the book offers you some tools for how to reevaluate what you're doing. So after year 1 and year 2, and this came from actually having a conversation with some of our colleagues in this business, so other consultants that said, look, you can do all things for all people. You can say yes to everything, which is where most of us start. However, the longer, more sustained success will come as you really understand where you can penetrate in and have sustained revenue and be known.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little deeper here in just a second, but you cover first talking about giver's gain. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I spent about 7 years in an organization called Business Networking International, or BNI, which for any coach starting up in a region that is new to marketing, we highly recommend looking into this particular organization, because they focus on the oldest, most well-established form of advertising there is, word-of-mouth advertising. And the philosophy behind BNI is giver's gain, meaning that if you're just a taker, you want people to let you do business for them for money, but you're not looking in the market to serve, to give back, to be a resource, to be someone that shows that your perspective is, I'm not just here to be the end. I'm here to be a part of the process, a part of the beginning and the end. And that really became an underlying foundation for how we built our company. So whether that was serving on the board of the local chamber of commerce, or doing pro bono work at the local church, or other places where we were asked to come in at cost, or speak to a group of youth, or come in and do a school at a reasonable rate, we began to be one of those that would do that. And then at the same time, even within our community of strengths coaches, realizing, and I heard Paul speak on this recently, where we had expertise and where others did, and being willing to refer to them when it made more sense for someone to do a project that didn't necessarily fit for us. We have a colleague here in Sacramento that focuses on education, and we are happy to refer our education work over to that colleague and let him do his expertise while we focus on some of our areas.
Whole agreement in place for, or is that just completely kind of pro bono?
It depends. So it's case by case. So there's times where if we are going to refer out business that there's an agreement that there's going to be some type of referral back, that's great. That's not always the case. Sometimes it's just a simple referral over, and this market fits better for you.
Okay, and that can vary right from relationship to relationship in the business sector. Sometimes you might want to have that locked down in a referral network that makes sense financially for both those partners. That might work the best. There might be other times where it's a loose, and it sounds like that's more where you guys are. There's these loose coalitions that just kind of work together for everybody's good. Do you feel like being in that scenario gives you more influence in the community because people see it as you giving back? Is that kind of the trick?
It does. So when you're established in a region as an organization that is looking out for the community, it is looking out for other businesses, then you're open to networking or partnership opportunities. So we have a colleague that this is more of a formal partnership. So this colleague happened to do a lot of work in the government space. So we live in a state capital here in Sacramento, and this colleague had a lot of work in our state government, and as a result, found that what we were doing with StrengthsFinder could dovetail very neatly with contracts he already had established. And those became formal agreements where we would come in and be that part of his company. And this is something we've told colleagues in the strength space. There are consulting firms that probably even today have someone doing quote unquote strengths, but it's out of the book. It's just something that they put a workshop together. They're not experts. They're not certified. They may go on to be, but we've established ourselves in our region as we are strengths experts. And so we are who you want to call when you want to integrate strengths within an organization. So with this partnership, that's been established. We do have a monetary split that happens on these agreements. These have become long-term 2-3 year contracts, and they've been essential to us building. And that came to us through some of these relationships, whether in mastermind groups or networking groups or chambers of commerce, or even being out there. I'll give a great example of what Darren happens to do. Darren does guest blog writing for different sectors out there that have a lot of exposure. And we've been able to grow our content marketing to gain some significant exposure in different channels. And now we're sharing where we're publishing their work, they're publishing ours, great exposure. So it's going to happen regionally. It can happen virtually. And what people seem to respond well to is when you're not looking just to take from a relationship, you're really looking to benefit, to build, to share. We find that people are very responsive to that, and it enhances your reputation.
Yeah, I find when you start giving, you start getting more than you can actually handle at times. And we 3 years ago, we began a philosophy here at Gallup of kind of opening the doors and just giving as much material away as I could, being in the center of that. I'm a tech guy, right? Being in the center of that, all of a sudden, I began to be seen as the expert in it, even though I'm not in a lot of ways, right? I interview, I ask questions, I find smart people to say things and amplify their message. So I love that. I love that you're highlighting that. I think that's super important that you in your giving, and this is a little counterintuitive to the way we're built. We kind of think we have to protect. And Absolutely. I think actually when we open up and we give away, we have more things come back to us and we're just so afraid. Sometimes that's never going to happen. You just have to keep doing it. You alluded to the pumpkin, and I love that. I love that thought as you think about growing. If you think about your story from starting very specific with 34 Strong and then kind of rolling out, Brandon, can you kind of just roll us through, like, where do you guys think you started your niche, so to speak, and how did that roll out over time?
So the example I just gave in government was one that we did not start 34 Strong thinking we were going to target the public sector. And as we formed relationships, we started being contacted by federal, state, local parks and recreation, cities. And as those reputations built, we found ourselves in that sector and found out that they really value certain certifications that you can gain and certain accreditations. So we began to build that, and now that has become a significant portion of the work we do. Close to 70% of our revenue is going to come through public sector. And within public sector, the way that you build, because you can't just go knock on their doors, it is all going to become or build through your circle of influence. So it's referral marketing, people that had a great experience with you. So you over deliver on what you promise. You give great service. You're a resource. You're really helping them move the needle. So measuring outcomes. I like something that Dean Jones shared once about, you're starting with awareness. Everyone starts with the awareness of strengths and appreciating it, but you got to move it to application. So now how do we normalize or operationalize this within? But then there's got to be an achievement part of this, right? We got to measure, do we see outcomes? And so whether that's you're using a Q12 or you're using the Strengths Orientation Index with managers, seeing that weight is important. So that became one for us. Another that happened, it's one of those happenstantially that has blossomed, is with chambers of commerce. And this is one I'm keen to share, because for any coach out there in any region, you probably have a chamber of commerce in the region. And chambers of commerce are there to service their members. They're a point of reputation for the members. It allows them to have a means to which they can validate or substantiate their business. There's stats out there that people trust Chamber of Commerce member businesses over ones that are not. And so we found that we were invited in to speak to these chambers, to their boards. And we realized, that they have a interesting challenge of not only servicing a broad group. 80 to 90% of their members are micro businesses or government entities, but then they have 10 to 20, sometimes a little more, 25% that are what they call their premier members or their chairman club. Well, those are the organizations that really help those chambers function. They pay 80 to 90% of the bills. Well, what these chambers are always looking for is, well, how do we service those members? And so as you become one that is thinking in terms of, well, how can I give to you, chamber staff, chamber board, in a way that I've built advocacy so that you're remembering me when an organization wants to think about, doing some work with their team, with their culture, and you can begin. So we've established some partnerships where we will go in and do training for the chamber staff. So we'll offer, we'll work with their team, we'll give them that. And then in exchange, we're going to offer a workshop that they will advertise to the entire chamber membership to come in and do a strengths discovery day, or a managing course, or a sales course with strengths. And we agreed to the chamber to split revenue on the workshop. So it's a win back to them. They have a revenue generator. It's a win to you. There's a little revenue that comes to you, but you've just met 10, 15, 20, 30 businesses that are now prospects for you. Well, with some of the chambers, we've now established that we're doing this 3-4 times a year for them, in addition to their board retreats. And they love it, because to them, we're not there to take from them. We understand their mission to service their members, giving them a vehicle to service, because for many of their premier members, chambers in and of themselves don't have services typically to offer. Well, with Strengths, we have a top drawer service. We have something that these premier organizations would highly value, and that's who we're seeing show up. So there's a lot of wins all the way around that circle, and it's a great example of an area where coaches can start to sink in roots and build some advocacy.
Yeah, I call that getting all your motivations in the right place, right? When everybody benefits, when you make a complete circle and there's great benefits for everybody, that really creates this swirling vortex of activity and positive activity. And then they're like, why wouldn't they have you back? Right? It makes sense to them. It makes sense to you. It's working well for everybody. And so that's pretty awesome. You mentioned another principle in there called top of mind marketing, which is you're trying to create that you become, when people think of this topic, what do they think of? What's on the top of their mind? Right. If you're in the chamber 3 or 4 times a year, guess what they think of when somebody comes to them and says, man, I got this problem. Hey, they were just 2 months away, or 3 months at most, away from some kind of activity with you. So I think that's another great principle when we think of the marketing. Anything else? Let me ask you about the future. So as a business, you're always expanding those circles a little bit. You guys, started with your base. When we think about corporate engagement and spread that out to market, to the government sector, right? You're getting some of these things with the chamber. What's in the future for you? What are you eyeing, or what can you talk about? Sometimes people don't want to talk about.
Well, I will offer this.
Happened yet,
what we're seeing happen in our region, and not just limited to us, but most universities or state schools have an extension program, and we're seeing more and more of those staff become certified, and they're wanting to have strengths courses offered. And we formed an alliance with one of our local universities, and we've become their Strengths Finder instructors to go into organizations, and now we're under their guidance. Well, that's exposing us to markets that we otherwise would not have necessarily met. So instead of seeing our extension programs as competition, we've gone over and said, well, we know you're always looking for instructors. And so even if a couple of you were just certified, you're not 10 years using the instrument certified, and we can help with some of these courses that you may not have. And they love that if you're willing to share some of your content, you're willing to help them design courses, because they want to attract people to their program. So that's been a really healthy and helpful way to grow, and we found some great alliances, which, by the way, there are times where somebody in the room of one of these classes wants to do more work, and it doesn't fit the university's model. So who gets that lead is the instructor who did that. So that's been a good one. On that note, I would offer, we just did this great exercise over the course of this year of understanding who is our target. So who does 34 Strong work with, and does our website, does our marketing material, does it tell you who we work with and what we do for you? So in the next month or two, we're still in that content development process. We've really honed in on who our targets are, and it's going to be the public sector. It is corporate, because the other percentage of our work is all in the corporate space. And then it's the chambers of commerce and associations, membership associations were another significant group that we found ourselves working with. That same concept as a chamber, building off of that third-party advocacy. So that's some of the direction where we're taking, and we're looking at some pretty healthy growth in the last 2 years, and we're expecting 17 to take us even further.
That's great. And in the university sector, they don't necessarily want to do the work sometimes, and they're happy to have somebody come in and really make their students better from that standpoint. Right. You guys have some principles when you think about the customer experience. You guys have some pretty well-defined principles about how you want your customer to experience 34 Strong. Can you kind of walk through those for me as we kind of wrap this?
Absolutely. So we have a statement that I literally am reminded of on a daily basis that says, a confused mind does nothing. And we have found that this is applicable when we are delivering a workshop. We have found it applicable to when you show up to our website or you call us. What is it that we want you to do next? Because we as consumers, all of us are consumers. If we don't know what's next, we stop in the process. And so as an organization, we've learned that we can't make our prospect guess. We don't want to make our workshop participants guess. We want to be very clear. And so we've learned the value of explicit versus implied instructions. So when we're explicit, and because what most of us learn over time is implied instructions are a root of several forms of frustration, where instead of saying, hey, if we're explicit, we're very clear with what we're offering, people seem to respect and appreciate, because that even allows for when, as I said earlier, if we decide someone coming to us doesn't fit, they're not who we are, and now we can go to one of our partners and refer. So that's a significant one. And then I would say keeping our message consistent. So we have adopted a content marketing strategy that has us blogging. We try to blog 2, 3, 4 times a week. And so we've got some outside bloggers that work with us. Darren and I do a fair amount of writing. And in all of our messages, we have found that if we're very clear at the end of each blog, a consistent message, so being very consistent with what do we want you to do next? And that has been a very helpful driver towards higher levels of conversion. Any area of marketing, you got to measure the ROI. What's the return on that investment of the time, the energy, the resources? And so those are some key principles for us.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that is be available, because even the most clear communication for some is not clear in their own context. And so
right.
I find in the communication that we give out here through Gallup, about 90% of our customers get it without any issues. They get there, I never hear from them again, everything's great. And then maybe 10% have some questions, and then maybe 1% of those just can't figure it out at all.
That's right.
And I have to be available to say, okay, let me just tweak it a little bit. And they're always, when they get it, they're always so grateful that someone stuck it through. to get it. But it is that it's not always easy. It's easy for you because you've done it, you've built it, you know it. But oftentimes you can't just put it out in the context of no information. I mean, of no availability, because you want them coming back to you sometimes. I mean, and that's hard. It's hard to scale that from time to time.
It is. I'll tell you, a year ago, we made the decision, and this is part of our business strategy, to hire in advance. So we hired a position that we weren't really ready for at the time. We hired a full-time biz dev person because we found that, Darren and I are delivering, we're working on different projects, and you need to be available when that phone rings. I know Sherry Strong with the Exchange is talking to coaches about call people back, be responsive, because they want to know that you're there and you're ready. Well, when you grow, a great problem is when you run out of time to get back to those emails or get back to those phone calls. So whether you contract those people or you eventually hire them, very helpful. So once we did that, to your point, those percentage of people that the content on the website wasn't enough, the email you sent, they want to talk to a live person. They want to talk through their unique scenario to see how to move it forward. And it was one of the most important hires we've made.
Yeah, and to your point about the confusion, the second purchase is always faster and easier because they've done it once. So you make some investments up front to make sure they can do it, and then when they're ready to do again, I mean, think about those. Sometimes I've gone out of my way to go to a store because I know where the item is, and I might have driven 15 minutes out of my way, but I want to just get in and get it and get out. And in your business, if they know you and you're predictable in what you're going to do, oftentimes they'll come back for you. Brandon, anything else in that session as we think about, I know, Darren was in there and Jamie was in there as well. Anything else come out of that session that you felt like we missed or you'd like to highlight?
I think the last point is, and it falls into the family of confused minds do nothing, is just what do you offer next? So when we think about a recent article from Gallup giving the new meta-analysis around the result of strengths within organizations, they shared the 7 steps. Here is what an organization can do to integrate strengths and to give some clarity around leadership alignment, management alignment, strengths community, the messaging, establishing coaches. And so we are asked, well, what happens next? How do you sustain this? And that's something that we're being asked about, that we've integrated. And it's something that, if we're selected, we'll probably talk about in the next year's summit, of just how does that start to work where organizations can become strengths-based. So that would be a great step that people are often asking about and building off of. Yeah.
Brandon, in pre-show, I asked you, are you guys business consultants? Is that a place that you guys want to live in?
Yeah, with being asked that question or thinking about that, when you asked earlier, which things have you learned to focus on and what did you let go? It's one that we realize that that's not our place right now. We're happy to refer to people that are really strong in that space. However, we're happy to talk to any of our fellow coaches out there. Happy to share what we've learned, what we've gained. Go back to Giver's Gain philosophy. We're happy to open up and say, here's what worked, here's what hasn't. To give others a chance to experience some of our good success.
Yeah, and I appreciate the transparency there, because the easy answer would be, well, if it, hey, you guys could easily become business consultants, but not seeing that as a core value right now. I mean, you could do it, but it might take you and chase you in a direction that may not be really where you want to be. All right,
I think a little pumpkin. Yeah. It would be one of the big ones, and it could be.
It could be a big pumpkin, but for you guys, I just don't think that's a rabbit you're interested in chasing at the moment. And maybe maybe someday. But I appreciate the transparency, honesty. I think, Brandon, a lot of business, a lot of solopreneurs, a lot of businesses, small business like this, I think it's really important to learn to say that no word. And I think, to me, that just proves you guys can say that, right? And say, not at this time. We're going to give back and help, but not necessarily dumping. Well, I hope that has been, Brandon, thanks for jumping in here. I hope that's been helpful for those who are listening. What's the best way, if someone had a quick question for you, wanted to reach out, contact you through 34 Strong, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you guys?
34strong.com, and there's a contact page, or our nomenclature is simple. It's first and last name at 34strong.com. So Brandon_Miller at 34, or any of Darren Veersamy or Aaron Harrison or Matt McCallick, any of our team members are more than happy to share and talk.
Awesome. Some great examples, Brandon. Thank you for coming on here and doing this. Appreciate you. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com. You can send us your email with your questions on this. If you missed anything in here whatever, you can send me an email, coaching@gallup.com. I can get right back to you on that. If you're interested in becoming a Gallup certified coach, Brandon mentioned that a couple times. You can see a complete list of all our courses that lead to certification on our courses site, courses.gallup.com. And if you have questions around that, you can send us an email, certification@gallup.com. We try not to make it too difficult for you to get in touch with us either. And there is a contact form right there on our live page. If you're interested in joining us, Brandon mentioned this, alluded to it, to our 2017 summit. And why wouldn't you be? It's going to be the biggest party in the Midwest coming up this summer. We're excited, maybe in the United States. We'd ask that you head out to CliftonStrengths Summit, all one word, CliftonStrengthsSummit.com, and all the information is available out there. Brandon, before we go, I'm going to throw out a challenge to you. Our friends in Rhode Island are working on a strengths-based state. Any chance that 34 Strong will be working on a strengths-based state in the state of California?
We thought about starting with our city and building. We're slightly larger than Rhode Island out here, but we are in the state capital, so we'll see what happens.
Oh, that's great. You're in a very important spot in the state of California. So think big, Brandon. Think big. Well, thank everyone for coming out today. If you found this helpful, we'd ask that you share it. And with that, we'll look forward to the next Call to Coach, and we'll say goodbye, everybody.